Hello, everyone. I am coming on today to talk about Venus in Leo. It's always important when a planet changes sign, but I don't always do a forecast on it. And the reason I'm doing a forecast on the Venus in Leo ingress is because it is where Venus is going to do her retrograde. And Venus only does a retrograde every 18 months. So it's quite a pertinent time. She spends a lot more time in a sign than she would usually spend. And we have to do some very personal re-evaluations because Venus is all about love, money, values, worth. Those are really personal things. Venus is also an attractor. So for those who have been in my red tent practice that we're working on now, we're working on one planet at a time, one planet a month, and kind of embodying and internalizing and understanding our own personal Venus energy and how to look at those spaces in our chart. And I'm kind of going to give you a little bit of a snippet of that in this video because ideally you're going to take your own chart and you're going to look at where this transit is going to be impacting you. So not so much your own personal Venus in this conversation. However, that will up-level your understanding. What is my Venus signature? And how does that tie in with this? For example, if you have Venus in Leo, you're going to be having a Venus retrograde and a Venus return process kind of intertwining. So that's going to have a whole different level for you. If you have other planets in Leo and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to share my screen so that I can show you. I'm using the next new moon chart at the moment, just because I'm going to do a forecast on the next new moon in a moment, which happens to be on my birthday. Good reset for me in my life right now. But I just want to remind you that I love using Astro Seek. It's what I use usually in these forecasts. I also use astro.com or Astrodienst. I usually use that if I'm doing personal readings with you, but when I do these forecasts, I love to use Astro Seek, and it's very user-friendly and easy to utilize for anybody and free. So I'm just going to show you, if you come to Astro Seek and to the Astro Tools and to the retrograde planets, that's where I find myself now. And then you can have a look. Okay, this is going to tell you all the Mercury retrogrades and the degrees, etc. But we're looking at Venus. So Venus is going to, she's just ingressed, which means she's just come into the sign of Leo. And what she's going to be doing now is she's going to travel all the way, getting slower and slower, because that is what happens when a planet is going to station retrograde. They start to slow down. It's almost like if you just imagine this train going at a certain speed, it's regular speed, and it wants to stop. It does and turn. It can't just do it. It needs to slow down. It needs to brake. Think about yourself turning a corner as you drive your car. You have to slow down. So what happens is she's going to come into Leo and she's going to begin to slow down. Oh, I just put some beautiful essential oils on my bangles in honor of Venus as I came to do this video, and they're wafting as I gesticulate like the true Gemini that I am. Anyway, so she's going to travel all the way, and this tells us here to 28 degrees and 36 minutes, this is where she stations retrograde. And you can see here it says direct. So she's going to station direct on the 4th of September. So on the 23rd of July, she stations retrograde at 28 degrees. And on the 4th of September, at 12 degrees and 12 minutes, she stations direct. So now we know that period of time. And for those of you who remember my conversation on shadows, what happens is now, as Venus enters Leo, she's just going to get all the way to her 12 degrees and 12 minutes before we pay too much attention, but I would already personally be paying attention. When she hits 12 degrees and she does her first pass to 28 degrees, that is called the shadow period. And when Venus is doing that section, she's moving forward, but she's slowing down. And the things that we start to see showing up in our lives, particularly around those Venus things that I mentioned, we should be cognizant. If I were you, I'd jot them down. I mean, I'm an avid journaler, again, good Gemini trait of mine. So it really is helpful for me to reflect back because I'm journaling regularly. And for me, this is an invaluable tool that I have in terms of helping me to embody and integrate and internalize things that are going on, because as a true Gemini, I work at warp speed. And then if I didn't have that concretizing and that ability to go back and say, well, what was happening 3 days ago again? Because I feel like I've had 3 weeks in 3 days. Then for me, that would be challenging. Of course, we all operate differently. So you find the tool that is best for you. But basically what's going to happen as she hits 12 degrees and travels to 28 degrees, we're in this process of covering ground that we're going to go over 3 times. And this is the first pass. And this is where things are starting to trigger, tweak, show up, etc. And that can be good things or challenging things. It's generally the challenging things that require us to go back and say, you know what? No. It's okay to say no to that now. You know what? I don't actually think that's part of my value system anymore. It always was, but why was it? Was it because that's what my grandmother said and my mother said before, and before me, and now I'm just carrying that on? Is that truly something that I feel and believe in my heart? And then sometimes you go, actually, no, it's not. So let me reevaluate, let me recalibrate, and let me change the way that I operate from the space of Venus, in this case, because we're talking about Venus. And then when she gets to 28 degrees on the 23rd of July, she's going to turn retrograde and she's going to head back. And that's when we start all that reevaluation. All the stuff that was starting to kind of just like come into the peripheral vision, trigger certain things and just get us a little shifty and uncomfortable around what we do value and how we give love and how we receive love and who's giving us love and who's not giving us the right kind of love that we need right now and who doesn't value us enough and do we value ourselves enough and blah, blah, blah. It's going to be different for each of us. We're going to retrograde back and we're going to go, now it's uncomfortable. Now I'm really recognizing what was just in the peripheral bubbling has now come into my focus and I have to actually ask myself these questions. And quite frankly, a lot of us are able to ignore these things for many moons, many Venus retrogrades, many years. Usually they come around at some point. If we are evolving, if we are growing, then at some point, and it's oftentimes when it hits your chart very personally, which is what I want to speak to in a moment, then you're going to say, oh, I've managed to avoid the last how many Venus retrogrades, but this is now hitting me hard. And that is something that can be very true as well. So she's going to get to the 28, she's going to head back to 12, and we've got to deal with all this angsty stuff. And then she goes direct, and then from 12 back to 28, it's the third pass. Now we're kind of getting an idea of how we can recalibrate and rectify what we've recognized is no longer working. And there again, it's our choice. Whenever we're changing patterns, it's very easy to default back to the old thing. I'm sure we can all recognize that that happens. And then you go, oh, I just did that again. I reacted in that same way that I know doesn't work for me anymore. Oh, I said yes when I should have said no. What is wrong with me? Just remember that the recognizing of it is huge. Until we've recognized it, we can't begin to change it. And then even once we've recognized it, sometimes it takes time. I mean, most times, if it's a really ingrained pattern, it takes time. So try to be gentle and compassionate with yourself. I feel like I'm speaking to myself as I say this. So I've just come to, as I said, the new moon in Gemini chart, which is not your chart, of course. But ideally, if you were to open your chart and this was your chart, let's imagine, you're going to look for the Leo space in the chart. So in this case, there's my icon. We come here to Leo and we say, okay, well, Leo is taking up much of the second house. And it's the ruler of the third house because this is the line entering into the third house. And Leo is at that cusp. So Leo is ruling the third house. So then we think, well, where is 12 degrees? And here you can see Venus is in herself at the time of the new moon, actually, is at 11 degrees. She's about to enter shadow at new moon, but I'm going to do the new moon forecast in a minute. So if this was your birth chart, you would say, well, Venus is going to enter her shadow right at my Venus. And then she's going to travel past my Mars and my black moon Lilith. You might not see that in your chart, but we're just using this as an example. And she's going to be doing all of this in the second house. Now, Venus is the natural ruler of the second house, and the second house is all about self-worth, my values. So if this was my birth chart, I would then say, wow, I can pretty much surmise that my Venus retrograde process is going to be, remember, Venus is about love and relationships. So you might be thinking, without knowing your chart, well, what's going to happen in my relationships? But if I looked at this chart, I would say, this is actually going to be all about me, not about my relationships with other people. It's going to be about my relationship with myself, my relationship to my self-worth. When am I saying yes when I should say no, saying no when I should say yes? And then we would also think about all the Venus things, because Venus herself would be in this chart. Remember, I said if you had Venus in Leo, then it would be a Venus return as well as a Venus retrograde in that same sign. That's going to be really potent. In this case, Venus and Mars are quite next to each other, quite close to each other, excuse me. And Venus is basically the attractor, and Mars is the I won't say aggressor. I mean, he can be an aggressor, but he's like the knight chasing the maiden. She's the maiden. She waits for him to rescue her on her tower. And I I hesitate to use that as an example, because I'm really at the moment personally going through a process of going, why are we listening to all these fairy tales and believing that we reach a point in our life and then we live happily ever after? And so we're all kind of waiting to reach that point. And I think we're so disappointed and jaded that we don't get there. But actually, that's not life. Life is just this constant, continual highs and lows, ups and downs. And I kind of feel like the fairy tales should be projecting some of that a little more. So I do hesitate to use this kind of knight and maiden energy, but it is an archetype that we can understand. Now, that really requires us to actually integrate the knight and the maiden within, not to be, I'm the maiden seeking the knight, or I'm the knight searching for the maiden. That's actually also not what this is about. When we're looking at our birth chart in astrology, you are the knight and the maiden. It doesn't matter if you're a man or if you're a woman. It doesn't matter what your sexuality is. It actually doesn't matter. You have a Mars, you have a Venus. In this chart, the two of them are together in the second house. This person is going to have to constantly be working on that balance within themselves. Am I the knight? Am I the maiden? Sometimes I feel like the knight. Sometimes I feel like the maiden. Sometimes I want to rescue everyone, and sometimes I want to be rescued. That's this person's journey. Now, because this person would be going through, of course, this person would be being born on the 18th of June this year, because that's this chart. So I'm just giving you an example, okay? Nobody yet has this chart because we haven't had that date yet. But this person is definitely going to have a Venus retrograde process that is very personal, very personally entangled and entwined in their own sense of who they are, what they value, how they want to go out and work in the world. That is where it's going to be most pertinent for them. So what you would do is you would open up your chart and you would say, where is that? So for me, I am a Leo rising, and actually this point on Leo here, 15 degrees would be my rising sign. So I know that Venus is going to retrograde through my 12th and 1st house, which would be here. And that is a point of me, how I show up in the world. That's going to be pertinent to me. There's a lot of ways we could make this a little bit more complex, but I don't want to just get too over the top for you at this point. But I want you to try and open your chart and have a look. There was something else I wanted to try and show you, if I can get into it without too much fuss, is the looking back. I just have to remember how to get there. Sorry, give me a second. Looking back at the Venus process as she has been, what is that? That's our retrograde chart. As she has been traveling her retrogrades for the last couple of retrogrades, because the previous retrograde was in Capricorn and the one prior to that was in Gemini. So for those of you who are wanting to, but can I remember how to find that chart? Damn, that's a pain. Okay, let's try to go to the month moon calendar and see if I can find it from there. There is a chart on here, if I can find it. Sorry, I should have had it open before we began, but I forgot. Yeah, that way you can go and look, well, where was Venus retrograding? Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to come back to the tools and I'm going to show it to you there. Where was Venus retrograding before? So we can go 22. Which is going to take us, now we look, where was Venus retrograding? So she was retrograding from the 19th of December at 26 degrees of Capricorn. So that journey was 11 to 26 Capricorn. So now let's take that back to our chart. So now what happened to me in the last Venus retrograde? We've looked at the dates, 11 to 26 Capricorn. We're going to look at this chart and we're going to go, well, In this chart, nothing was overtly triggered, although it was opposing the sun, the station, and the sun moon, the stationing point. So there will be other ways we can look at it, but I think for now, just look at what is in that specific space. If you're further along in your astrology, you can look at the oppositions, the squares, the trines, the sextiles, and all of that. But for the most part, you're just going to go there and you're going to look at the dates and you're going to say to yourself, how was that period of time? Again, a journal would be handy because then you could, I mean, can you remember what you were doing December, January of 2022? If you can't, then you would need to find a way to reflect. And so one of the ways that's great to do that is check your emails or check your messages around that time to give you an idea of what you were doing, but you'd have to scroll back pretty far. So that was the previous retrograde, Venus retrograde, which gives you also like, well, what is my general Venus process when I retrograde? But of course, in this particular person's chart, probably we would find that this one is going to be a stronger one for them. And then the previous one, which was in Gemini, I think that probably is 2020. Let me quickly look. Okay, she started 29. No, let me go to 2020. Sorry. We go. Yes, here we go. May 13th to June 25th, and she was doing 25 to 21 degrees. Okay, so then you go into this person's. Now, this would be pertinent for this person because they're holding a lot of Gemini energy. They're a Gemini rising, Gemini Mercury, don't worry about the part of fortune, and Gemini Sun Moon. So you would look back to the last two Venus retrogrades and go, how have I been excavating my sense of value in the world? How have I been adjusting where I'm not showing up to my full value or where I'm not being appreciated to my full value? And that will just, each time we do one of these retrogrades, it's like peeling back the layer of an onion. If we're working with them, which is obviously what I'm hoping everybody watching this video wants to do, is to work with the energy that you hold and say, okay, that was uncomfortable for me in this way. How am I doing with that now? Because you can also check your progress, that's also really important to check your progress. And I always think, especially with Venus, pat yourself on the back. Venus is a benefic planet. She is an attractor. She wants you to be doing well. That's what she wants for you. She wants to gift you grace and beauty and love and happiness and all the good stuff. That's what she wants to do if she's doing well. But of course she has a shadow side. We all have a shadow side. Every planet, every archetype, there is a shadow side. But when you come back and you reflect on these things, you go, what is my progress? And then you go, damn, I've messed that one up. I've been trying to change that. Now that I look at it, I can see that I haven't changed it at all. Okay, I'm going to give it another try. Not, self-flagellating, but rather, okay, how do I do this differently? I see where I went wrong. How can I work with it? And there's no harm in failure because it is in the failures that we actually see. And also to remember, as it is peeling back the layers of the onion, I always joke, like, certainly I must be like the tiny little sliver in the center of the onion by now. But for some reason, it's just more layers. But if we're peeling back the layers, the other thing to remember is you might see another variation of the same pattern. So you get to the overt thing first and you're like, geez, I absolutely know that I don't know how to say no. So from now on, I'm going to take a beat before I say yes to anything. And then you start doing that and you get a little bit better. And then you come to the next Venus retrograde and you go, oh my goodness, I've been taking a beat and saying maybe, but then I've actually been doing it anyway. Damn. So I'm not saying no. So you start to see the more subtle layers as you peel down those layers and drop through. And so that's kind of how we work with these retrogrades if we want to squeeze the juice out of them, attract the golden goodness from them. So I hope this has been helpful. And all my links are below this video if you want to check out what I have to offer. And please like, share, subscribe, comment, share your own Venus stories. I would love to get to know a little bit more about you. And if you've enjoyed this idea of how we're kind of looking at the chart, remember that I have my Red Tent offering, which is each month we focus on a different archetype. Last month, because it was new moon in Taurus, we work within the moon's sort of school. She's the headmistress of the school, and then she has a masterclass teacher every month. So this last month, Taurus new moon, Venus rules Taurus. Venus was our masterclass teacher, and coming up on the new moon in Gemini, which was the chart we were just looking at, Mercury will be our masterclass teacher. So if you're interested in stepping into that, please also check the links below, get in touch with me, private message me, and I will be happy to send you in the right direction. Have a beautiful Venus process, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for watching.